Hello there and welcome back. We are on page 20 of the student text. And remember last time we looked at the terms about the environment on page 53 of the textbook. So if you have that textbook and you're using that, you can follow along there too. Okay, we're looking at the carbon cycle in this diagram. And I want to cite the source. It's hard to read. The image source is right there. Fotolia.com is where this image came from. And this is a very simplified version of the carbon cycle. I'm not saying that this diagram is simple. It's tough to read, but it is simpler than some you may encounter. And I just want you to have a general idea about what's going on with the carbon cycle. So let's just focus for a minute on this picture and what it's telling us. And we saw in a diagram earlier about the water cycle how important it is to follow the arrows. The arrows mean something. So just pick a place in your diagram. It doesn't really matter where. I'm going to start with this little bird over here that has unfortunately passed away. And this is a morbid thought, but the bird has died. And so I'm going to pick up the carbon cycle right here. So this bird maybe was sitting in that tree, he died, he fell to the ground. So here's the first arrow that I want to follow down here. Okay, the bird is decomposing. As soon as that bird ceases to live, his body starts to decompose. And decomposing matter gives off CO2. So we need to stop and ask ourselves, what is CO2? And I think rather than belabor this, I'm just going to ask you to skip down here to question number 2. Where I'm asking you to draw a molecule of CO2. CO2 is carbon dioxide. The C stands for carbon, O, oxygen or oxide, di means 2. So we have carbon, C, 2, di, oxide, oxygen. So CO2, whenever you see that, you need to know as a high school graduate that that is carbon dioxide. So they want me to draw a molecule of carbon dioxide. So here's what I need to do. I need a molecule that has carbon and oxygen. And I know from many years of doing this that carbon is a little bit smaller than oxygen if you're talking about an atom. So I'm going to draw 2 different sizes of atoms, and I'm going to make this one be C for carbon and this one be O for oxygen. So we have 1 atom of carbon, we have 1 atom of oxygen, but remember we're not looking at this is carbon monoxide, which is a dangerous gas. It can kill you if you breathe it, but that's not what I'm trying to make. I'm trying to make carbon dioxide. So I actually need a second oxygen atom. We need 2 of those according to the formula, 2 oxygens. So I'll paste that one in, and then I need to connect those. Right now, I just have 3 atoms. But as soon as I make the connection, I have a molecule. So this is 1 molecule of carbon dioxide. It has 2 O's and a C. Okay. So back to our picture of our poor little bird. So the decomposing bird is giving off carbon dioxide. Anytime you see CO2, you can substitute the phrase carbon dioxide. Okay, So let's move on to the next arrow. And I'm going to also call your attention to this pile of cow poop, because that also is decomposing matter. So they should have put an arrow there to show that the cow poop is also decomposing. So we're giving off carbon dioxide. Okay, so let's move on over here to this arrow right here. And this one actually goes with this sentence. Animals eat plants which contain carbon. Remember, all living things contain carbon. Now, this is not carbon dioxide, this is just carbon atoms. So we're talking about just plain old C's. Okay. So the cow eats the grass. Some of it goes through his belly, out his backside. That's going to decompose and give off CO2. But the cow is also breathing. So anytime you see the word respire, think of breathing. Respiration is breathing. So animals breathing, I need to make sure my grammar's correct here. Animals breathe and give off carbon dioxide. And that should not be gives, that should be give. Animals breathe and give off CO2. So when you and I breathe out, we are putting carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. And remember, carbon dioxide is a carbon and two oxygens joined together. So this one down here is just plain carbon. This is CO2, carbon dioxide. And that's what they're showing me here, that the animal is breathing and giving off that carbon dioxide. Okay, there's another way that carbon dioxide is coming up into the air, and that has to do with this. Combustion, which is burning, loosely translated. Burning gives off CO2. So not only is the fireplace in this house giving off CO2, driving our cars is giving off CO2. Anytime a fuel is ignited and it burns, that is releasing carbon dioxide. So the orange arrows are showing you all the ways that carbon and carbon dioxide get into the environment. And then here is a very important change. What's different about this arrow? Well, the color changes. So you notice that these orange arrows are all showing the same thing. This arrow is showing me something different. This is showing how carbon dioxide leaves the atmosphere. Green plants absorb carbon dioxide. And this is why we need green plants, because you and I are exhaling carbon dioxide, or dogs and cats are breathing that out. Something has to be out there to soak that up. And green plants are one thing that does that. So this is why it's a cycle. Things are putting carbon into the ground. Carbon is in the air, but it's also being pulled from the air. So this cycle repeats itself over and over again. Okay, let's take a look at question 1. It says to name 3 ways that CO2 is released into the air. And we have those right here. If we look at our arrows, we have them. 1 way is right there. 2 is right there. And 3 is here. So those orange arrows are going to help you understand what's going on here. So we have decomposition, when dead things decompose, or when that animal poop decomposes. So decomposition is 1 way. Respiration, when the animals breathe out. And I should say that that's animal respiration, because plants, even though they don't have lungs, they do respiration. So animal respiration, and then also burning, combustion. Let's use their word, because the test will use the word that they use in the diagram a lot. So let's stick with their vocabulary. So those three ways put carbon dioxide into the air. And we have already drawn our molecule with 3 atoms. So how is CO2 removed from the air? Well, here is the way that that's removed. The green plants are removing carbon dioxide. So we can just say by green plants absorbing. Okay, and I should be using complete sentences to answer these, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to do that. If I were doing this as a formal test or something, I definitely would write those in complete sentences. That's just good form. Okay, this is the carbon cycle. You may or may not see that on the test, but if you do, I want you to have a little bit of understanding so that you can read their diagrams a little faster. In the next video, we will look at the nitrogen cycle, which is a little more complicated, but we will take a look at that in the next film.